Welcome back to the Trend Micro Vision One demo series. We have plenty of new folks joining us for the first time today, so please do me a favor, say hello in the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm your host, Shannon Murphy, and I am happy to introduce my friend and subject matter expert, Tim Miller, who will be walking us through the demo today. Tim is the Senior Product Manager for Vision One and XDR, and he and his team have invested quite a bit of time over the past few months consulting our customers and building this powerful new app in Vision One, the Executive Dashboard. Like I mentioned, this app was built in partnership with CISOs and security leaders around the world and provides information about your company's overall risk index, which is a comprehensive score out of 100 points based on the dynamic assessment of risk factors, including exposure, attack risk, and security configuration risk. With that primer out of the way, I'll quickly touch base on some housekeeping items. We will wrap up before the half hour is over, so we'll have some time to answer any questions you might have. We'll also be answering questions live during the demo, so please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box at any time, not the chat box. If you put it in the Q&A box, it just helps us triage a little bit easier, and we will do our best to get to some of those questions live at the end of the session as well. So without any further hesitation, let's take a look at what the executive dashboard looks like in the product. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome everybody, new timers and old timers alike. Happy to show you the executive dashboard today. As Shannon said, we've spent several sessions speaking with CISOs in the industries out there and getting their input. And I think we've come up with a really great platform application here for you all to get a quick view of what's going on in your environment. To start off with, I do need to point out that this is still in preview. If you're not familiar with what preview means here at Trend, that means that we're giving you access to the app as we're developing it. Once it's in GA, that preview moniker will come off, and then it will be publicly available as it is today, but it'll be publicly available and finished for everybody to consume. Going to be showing you a couple different components here today, and if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A. We have Kent helping out, and he's an expert, subject matter expert as well in this XDR and Vision One, so we should have a good time today. So starting off with, this is the executive dashboard. So how do you get here? You come up to our security posture widget, and then you come on down to the executive dashboard. Right, so that's where I just dropped us into right away. And as I come in here, I can take a look at what my environment consists of and what I'm seeing out there. So right now in my environment, this is a demo environment, hence the name. I can see what all is going on over the last 30 days. I can also add in comparisons for company size, right? So here's my line compared to other companies of the same size that are Trend customers. I can also add in regional average, so not just the company size, but what the regional average looks like and how I compare, as well as the industry average, right? Which we're following right along pretty much with the industry average here. Again, take into account this is a demo environment, so we're actively trying to hit it and give it some data. We would hope that your environments don't necessarily meet the same requirements. So again, as Shannon said, across the top here, we have the risk overview, which is the screen I'm on now, exposure, attack overview or attack risk, and security configuration. I'll go through all these different headings as we get through them. But as a high level here at the bottom, we're going to start with some devices. And then we have some internet-facing assets, and then we have some other items that are coming soon. So just to give you an idea, between when we first released this, devices was all we had available. Within 2 weeks, we had the internet-facing assets, and then we'll be adding these others. So again, moving fairly quickly. So we should see the preview moniker come off of this in short time. I can take a look over the last 6 months to see how my environment is doing. So right now, I've only had this for 3 months. So I can see where my exposure index is, what my attack index is, my security configuration risk. Speaking to the CISOs, they wanted to see time broken down in a couple of different ways from what we would normally do standard, right? What does my last 24 hours look like, last 7 days, 30 days, 60, 90, et cetera, so that they could get an idea of what their quarter looks like, what the last 6 months look like, so they can present that up to the upper management as well. So this will show you how you're trending over the last 6 months, so you can get an idea where you stand. We also come down and we can see what devices we have in the environment. So we have 218 discoverable devices out of 300. What does that number mean? This 300, you can actually update the estimate for the number of endpoints you have in your environment. So if you think you have closer to 400 or 250, you can update this number to get it a little bit closer. But this is also pulling from data that it has from items it's seen in the environment before too, right? So not just what you have an endpoint sensor or an EPP on, but what the network is seeing as well. So you'll see these numbers fluctuate a little bit, but you can come in and update this number to something that you feel is more accurate representation. So as we come down, full visibility, I have full visibility on 21 out of 218 endpoints, limited visibility on 196, and partial for 1. So I can get an idea of what I'm seeing in my environment, and that all pulls into what I'm able to collect data from. So you see we've got several items that feed into the assets, pretty much everything here except Office 365. So if you do have these components in your environment, they'll feed more information into the executive dashboard. And as you go over these data sources, you'll see that all data sources available, we're seeing for asset exposure, and then for managed security as well. Oh, my screen seems to have locked up. There it goes. So you can see that it does change as we mouse over the different items. So those are the sensors that will feed into those specific components. I can go back to my dashboard here real quick under my risk overview, and you can come in. Now I can come down and see what device risk assessments I have. So out of 300, again, estimated, 129 are reported in as low risk, 17 as medium, and 2 as high. Again, I can come in and take a look at where that data is coming from if I need to. All right, go back into the risk assessment one more time. Now, if I wanted to get an idea of what items I have facing the internet, this is kind of good for you to understand. So whether they're public facing web servers, other servers that you don't know about, right? It might be good to identify what you have available out there. So we have some risk factors here. Unexpected public services and ports, highly exploitable CVEs, hosts with insecure connection issues. We're alerting you to security risk potential, right? So maybe you want to take a look and see what these items are. We also are identifying 70 different domains here, which is quite a few. This can be referring to maybe you're a web service provider, and you can see that you have 7 different domains that come in and out of your network. We have 2,368 IPs that are also identified, right? And again, you can see the risk values associated with them. Coming soon, we will be offering information on how to help mitigate these risks and remediate them, both automated and in manual process to help you a little bit better. I go to where you need to right off the top. So let's take a look just real quick at what these highly exploitable CVEs look like. So we got 98 of them in my environment. So this is quite a bit. And so I want to get more details on that. So I click on the view details. Now I've got my list of the CVEs that are recognized in my environment and the hosts that these may possibly be available on. So what I say possibly is because if you're using something like cloud and workload security with our host-based IPS, you may have protections already in place on this, even though you haven't patched yet. Or maybe you're using some other form of patch IPS or mitigation. So we just want to alert you to the potential based on what we're seeing on those endpoints that they could be susceptible to these CVEs. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are, right? Depending on what you have in place security-wise. Click on the CVE, I can gather more information on that. And then if I come into hosts, I can see which hosts are holding this. So quite a few. You see I've got a lot of Amazon Web Service endpoints. So I can come into each one of these and identify what's going on. So I got my host here. I can see the public IPs that are attached to it, and I can dive in a little bit further on it and see what reach this has. All right, just go back. So this has brought us into the exposure overview tab. Again, this score goes together for the overall risk assessment. And we can see, based on unpatched vulnerabilities and system configurations, where we're sitting at risk-wise as far as our exposure, right? So we have 8 unique unexpected services and ports. Again, what we're looking at here is what is typical ports that are open for public facing, right? 80, 443, that sort of thing. And if you're seeing ports that aren't typically open, that could be an indicator of somebody who has maybe a beacon on a public facing entity, right? So you want to be able to identify when those exist and go in and grab more details on those and how mitigate those risks before they become an issue. And then hosts with insecure connection issues. And this could be anything from a non-secure web connection to where it's reaching out to specifically. Okay. Come into the attack overview. This one is one of my favorites because I can get an idea of what's happening. Again, you can change this breakdown to a custom date, but by default, the last 30 days, what kind of attack phase overview I'm seeing, right? So from initial access to seeing persistence mechanisms being dropped to credential access. You can see this this attack is fairly along the lines to becoming very dangerous in the environment. And if you look at the attack phase here, we got looks like an advanced persistent threat. These could be signs of a ransomware attack. So we see a targeted ransomware attack possibility here showing as well. They haven't gotten to lateral movement yet, but once we get into that area, we've already got credential access. We move into lateral movement. You guys are well on your way to being in real danger. Again, this is our lab environment, so we're controlling all this. But it gives you an idea of where you are. So ideally, we want to see nothing in here, right? So this kind of give you a quick come in, see what's going on. Hopefully, everything's clean and you can move on. We're also showing you in this example, this one endpoint is being impacted by this APT, right? It's fairly advanced. We've gotten to the credential access phase, so definitely something we want to look at. But in this instance, we're only seeing one visual endpoint that's being affected. As we scroll down, we can see detections by attack type. So ransomware, malware, phishing, exploit attempt. So we are seeing an exploit attempt with 15 compromised account attacks towards us. This is what we saw within globally. There's a lot of going on in our environment. This is actually clean because we've been mitigating those risks. Same here with the mitigated events by attack type. You see it's broken down. You can see in our environment, we've got this flat line across the bottom because we're mitigating them at the EPP level. But if we didn't have those protections in place, we're showing that where we would be ranking amongst globally. Detections by protection layer. So right here, we're showing email endpoint and network. So this could be Deep Discovery Inspector or Tipping Point or Cloud App Security and our endpoint. So a lot of stuff comes in through email for initial, but once it's on the endpoint, that's when it's already starting to become too late. But we can see what those different protection layers are recognizing at any given time. And lastly, it's bringing us down into the workbenches. So over the last 30 days, we saw 15 alerts being opened. We can take a look at what those are. And we could even click on the go-to app and it'll bring us into workbenches. All right. Then lastly, the security configuration. So as you were probably aware, Trend Micro Vision One is a native XDR component. So we're looking specifically here at our endpoint protections and endpoint sensors. And down below, we can see our Apex One as a service and our Cloud One workload security and what our policies look like. So this directly correlates with what policy settings you have in your environment. So you see, I have everything pretty much turned on all my policies except for vulnerability protection. I only have 6 out of 168 policies that have this enabled on it. So this is a clear indicator that I should take a look. Why don't I have this enabled on the other 162? So we can take this back to the security admin and ask that question. Same thing with any of the other components, right? If I wanted to get more information, like what is behavioral monitoring, I can click on this and I can see what my behavioral monitoring is, and I can also see what policy editing I have in place. So I have 5 out of 15 policies that have it set the action to pass, which means if we do identify something as a behavioral issue or potential behavioral issue, we're just going to allow it to happen. Whereas in mitigation, we're actually really going to take action and stop it. So you can get an idea of where you are on the chain through the policy without having to go into the management console alone, right? So this will save them time as well. Again, all this is designed to give our CISOs the ability to come in the morning and take a look at where everything is, and then pull from the data we have here to build their reports to talk to the upper management. So they have the ability to go in, identify if there's any new risks over time, how are they getting better at mitigating their risks? Are they getting better at identifying what's happening and resolving that quickly? And then that allows them to show, hey, this is working, or we need help here, right? So it helps with budgeting and that sort of thing as well. All right. I just want to go and show one more thing. Attack surface discovery is very closely related to the executive summary. And this is also in preview, just released not that long ago. And we can see, again, we can see the devices in our environment. So 218 visible devices, 129 devices have risk assessment, and then 21 have devices that are managed. With managed agents, I should say, EPP. So it's kind of all over the board, but you can dive in and take a look and see what device name, what operating system, what their IPs are, even IP6, who the last user logged in is, what number of highly exploitable CVEs they may have on their endpoints, and what sensors caught this information. So it was network sensor, Trend Micro Vision One, and then lastly, when it was detected. So very recently. We can see that Yvonne probably has something going on. We want to take a look and mitigate what's going on in her endpoint. All right. If we come over into the internet facing, this gives us a little bit of an idea of, first of all, what domains we have out there, right? So these are all our internet facing domains coming out of here. We saw that number before on the executive dashboard. There's a little screenshot of each one of those websites that we have. I can also jump in and take a look at an individual host. Like, what is this one? I don't recognize this host. I can jump into it and get more information. So I can see that there's some deprecated SSL, weak TLS cipher. What's that? So I can come in and say, well, maybe we need to make sure we increase this TLS cipher, make it stronger. But I can also identify if this is something that I didn't know about, or I did know about, say, oh, okay, yeah, I recognize this after all. But there are some things I can take action on here, right? SSL certificates expiration, that sort of thing. So we're just pulling this information from the endpoint, kind of bringing it all in one spot so you can manage that locally without having to jump around through a lot of locations. And then lastly, you can see we're also looking at IPs broken down on the world map. So if we're seeing IPs popping up in regions where we don't have offices, probably a good idea to take a look and see what's going on in those regions. Again, this is in preview, so we've only got the first 2 items here. We'll be adding the same for the executive dashboard: user accounts, cloud apps, cloud workload, cloud storage in the coming weeks and months.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the demo, Tim. We do have some questions for you today, so let's jump into it.
All right.
First question here on the risk index, so the scoring. This individual is asking, how frequently is that score refreshed?
So the score refreshes as the data refreshes. So if all of a sudden we saw a huge spike in in an attack overview, for example, this number would go up correspondingly. It's not a delayed thing. So as we receive the data in and we manage it, we'll see it come through.
Awesome. Next question here. What is used to gather the CVE data from the hosts?
So we're looking at things like the operating system, what apps are running on it, that sort of thing. It's the same kind of technology that we use in our IPS, our host-based IPS, to identify vulnerabilities there as well. And we're comparing it to the CVE threat intel that we have as part of our trends threat intel. So we're comparing versionings and OS levels to the CVE, known CVE list.
Okay, super. Next one here, where, maybe kind of similar, where are those unexpected public service information coming from? So is it coming from scan data? Is it coming from the XDR endpoint sensor?
Yeah, so as you saw, I can bring it back in here to the attack surface. It could be coming from any number of places. So specifically, if we were looking at like the ports that we were talking about under internet-facing assets on non-typical ports, those could be coming from the network sensor. They could be coming from the standalone endpoint sensor or an EPP, whether it's Apex One as a service or cloud and workload security. So any one of these sensors that feed in, giving us the data, we get a lot of it from the endpoint, but when it comes down to the network components, we do also get some from network. So there are network components in both, but we'll sometimes see a little bit more with the network sensors.
Okay, cool. Next question here, on the attack overview tab and the cyber threats widget, how can an analyst drill down to see which machines are being impacted and what the details of the finding are?
I'm sorry, one more time on the last bit there. I was navigating.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so yeah, in the attack overview tab and the cyber threats widget, how can an analyst drill down to see which machines are being impacted and what the details on the finding are?
So that's a good question, because we can't click in this today. I've actually given that feedback back. Again, it's in preview. This will become clickable for them to go into it at one point in the future. Right now, where I would go is, if we're seeing it here, it will be in the workbench as well. So we can go there and identify it. We could also see items in the targeted attack detection. If you're not familiar with that, it's under the XDR as well. So these are the two places I would be looking for those, but we are creating links for that.
Awesome, cool. So future enhancement there.
Yeah.
Next question here, word on the street. So I've heard that it is planned to provide an on-demand scan for vulnerability scan in order to change the amount of CVEs. So for example, after the patch has been installed on the device, is there an ETA for the on-demand scan for vulnerabilities?
I don't have an ETA right now on that. But I also want to call out a little bit of a differentiation, because I want to make sure there's no confusion. The vulnerability scan will look for those CVEs, but it's not a vulnerability scan in that maybe you would compare it to a Qualys or a Tenable, something like that. We don't go quite into that level. So I just wanted to make sure that there's an understanding there that this isn't necessarily intended to be a replacement for that, but it is an option that is available to our Vision One customers. And that manual scan is something that is being worked on. Unfortunately, I don't have a delivery date on that as of right now. Okay,
cool. Next question here. How are the public domains gathered? So I think we're looking at discovery. Would anything be captured if we only have workload security running?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're capturing that from the endpoints, right? So whether majority of this is actually coming from the endpoint, because if you look at this, these are Amazon Web Services. So unless you're using our DDI or tipping point through Network One in Amazon, we wouldn't necessarily be seeing all that. So this is coming from cloud and workload security protected endpoints, or if they were using the standalone sensor, we could also gather it that way. So this is telemetry data that we're receiving from those endpoints.
Okay, super. Next question here. How can we add more domains or public IPs to the internet-facing assets inventory?
So they should be coming in based on the EPP component or the endpoint sensor component you have available there. This isn't necessarily something that you're adding to. So this isn't like a whitelist or anything. This is what we're seeing in your environment.
Okay, super. And then just this is a clarifying question on the risk index scoring again. So for example, if I'm at 60 out of 100 and I patch some hosts, when will that number update? Is it daily, hourly, or dynamically, on demand?
Right. So that kind of goes into that other question with the manual scan. We got that coming. But if you did patch these endpoints, they should be reporting back on a daily schedule. That's not something necessarily we're checking for on regular intervals. It's more of like here's where the state of the endpoint was at the end of the day sort of thing.
Cool. Super. Thanks a lot. Next question here. Can we export the list of all assets from attack protection features? And then can we check which hosts don't have that feature enabled? For example, like web reputation.
So, okay. So so this is just the policies. It's not the hosts. So if you went into I think I'm gathering what you're saying. So if you wanted to see how many policies had this host or had this web reputation enabled on, we have enabled on all. But then at this point, you would have to go into the console itself to identify which policies didn't have it. To identify the endpoints, that would also be at the console level as to which endpoints have it. But that's something I can take back if you wanted to see that in here, to specifically gather a list of endpoints that didn't have it. That's something I can take back and ask if we can add that on. Well, obviously we have the data, so.
Cool. I've got an MSP question here. So for MSP, is there a way to have tenants for managed customers grouped so the Vision One view can be filtered to a specific customer?
Yeah, so multi-tenancy does not exist in Vision One right now. So that's something that is a little bit harder to do. I think you guys already knew that. So we don't have that capability right now.
Okay, cool. And that is all of the questions that we have for today. And we're coming up just to the end of the half hour here. So just to close things out, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Tim, for walking us through the demo, and Ken answering Q&A live as well. We will be sharing an on-demand link with the full playlist of demos from the past couple seasons, as well as today's session, either this afternoon or early tomorrow morning for you to watch again or share with a colleague. We will also save the date for May 26th, where we will be covering threat intelligence and suspicious object management. And then lastly, if you have any questions that we weren't able to get to today, please don't hesitate to share either in the community forum, reach out to your sales rep, or respond to the follow-up email that you'll receive later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Looking forward to seeing you at the end of May. Thanks again.
Thanks all.